by way of introduction, rather than giving a formal introduction, I think I just want to speak to the fact that one of the lessons perhaps we learn from the Irish model, if there is a lesson, is that social partnership, if it is to succeed, will be driven in no small part not just by the politicians and stakeholders, but by the role of senior civil servants, people like himself, who were able to broker agreements and work the fine details of policy, which are vital to the success. It's not just agreeing on grand strategy. That is what starts the ball rolling. But when it gets down to the tactics of actually making an agreement a feasible reality and sort of crossing the bridges on a daily basis that are constantly and the obstacles that need to be overcome, this is something that will recur, and it'll be an important thing for us to consider. So, Paul, would you like to take the floor now and give us your presentation?
Minister, members of Parliament, colleagues, John, Chairman, thank you very much. You said what you said. You preceded me in your comments about the bilaterals. However, what I've been really fazed by, I wasn't surprised by the level of interest or by the commitment of people here in Jamaica to their society, but I was thrown over by and I'm very humbled by the access I got and by the courtesy and the welcome I've received here. I'm not a public speaker, it's not my skill set. I've always stood behind my politicians, and I haven't written their scripts necessarily, but I might have provided a few ideas in our dialogue. And I've always been reassured by the capacity of political systems, both in Ireland and here in Jamaica, to find that way of reaching out to our societies and bringing them together in common purpose. And I don't come here to sell a model or to say what's right or wrong. But what I do come to say, perhaps, is that if we collectively identify our problems and decide collectively that we're going to fix them, we can make a material impact for our people. I don't believe that peoples anywhere are necessarily different, and in my talk today I'll try to catch some of our experiences that reveal to us that the Irish weren't genetically totally incapable of fixing their problems, that we weren't predestined to always be the poorest people in the world, that we weren't just interested in music and song and drink, but that we could also work and work well. And that's what we learned. When I was in my office, I was drawing up my slideshow. And apologies, people who have to turn ahead. The slideshow is really a prompt for me. It's not so much a prompt for you. But I was drawing up a slideshow, and I tried to capture state colours a little bit in it. But one thing I did when I was looking at the Microsoft palette, they had this image of a runner. And I was doing this in about a month ago. And during August, I was on holidays in Kerry, in the southwest of Ireland. We had lots of rain, continuous rain. And so I watched television. And one thing I watched was Shelley-Ann Fraser cross the finishing line. And she touched my spirit. The sheer joy when she crossed that line, doing this, jumping up and down. And I said, yeah, I'm going to Jamaica. Wow, aren't they lucky people to be able to produce such a fine athlete? And through the week, more athletes appeared. So I realized at the beginning, first of all, that individually Jamaicans can be globally the best. Not the second best, third best, fourth best, globally the best. And then the relay team runs. And I say, that's only individually can Jamaicans be the best, but in teamwork, collectively, they can be the best in globe. So, I think that some of these external events are necessary, and they were very necessary for the Irish anyway. We did well in football and music and literature and a few other places. It was very important for people to get that reassurance that both individually and collectively they can be best in globe if they do the right things. Just to give you a little bit of a backdrop, I know we're here in an academic institution, and I'm not trying to do, this isn't sort of I work in an academic institution myself, but only in a leadership role, not as a senior academic. Just to understand our country a little bit, we've had a massive change in our society over the years. We had population decline. Our society bled people on a continuous basis up to the 1990s, going back to the 1800s. And that's perhaps the best metric of a failure of a society. The fact that our children, and our children going back over 100 years, found that our society could not accommodate them, could not help them realize their ambition, fulfill their skill sets, give something to their children. They had to leave. We've had, even as late as the 80s, 6% net of our people left. Our birth rates have always been high. It's been a good thing. Irish people breed well. And that's not, I'll just notice, because we have the main Viagra factory in the world, because it's only for export from Ireland. We have had, in the past, relatively low participation rates of women in our labour force, and that has been absolutely transformed. And now we're well at the highest levels in Europe. We have a participation rate now of older people that's much stronger than Europe. And we're very, very lucky. We have a dependency ratio, like sort of the numbers of people working in economy out of the population. That means that we don't have to carry a lot of non-workers, older people, younger people. We have a much higher rate than most of Europe. The aging time bomb that's going to hit China fairly soon, that's hitting Italy, Germany and France today, is not scheduled to hit us until 2050. And if we keep our society very, very open, and if we attract in new migrant workers into our society to live and to thrive, we should keep this dependency ratio very healthy and avoid some of the problems that more closed societies are suffering. If you just look at the population chart there, sorry about the colour and the distance now, but back in the 1840s we had a huge famine, and we had massive loss of life and huge immigration. All through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s and into the 60s, we had immigration. Into the 70s with more immigration, outward migration. And then we started getting things right. And the last little tail going upwards on that slide is perhaps the most important metric of a transformed society. Very few countries in this globe have charts like that go down, down, down. So Irish people believed that they were incapable of doing anything right, and our people left. We had a political legacy for Ireland. I think it's another thing to help you understand how we changed, was that we as a people, we had a civil war, we had a war of independence, and in 1921 we gained our independence. The treaty of that independence divided our country into the north and south. We had a civil war over that treaty, and today our two dominant parties are parties that were associated with their attitude during that civil war. So we as a people never did what they did in England, Germany, France. We never divided on Christian democracy and social democracy. We never had that ideology. That never took root within Ireland. We learned from our diaspora. We started looking outside and saying, well, we could build a country that trades internationally. Now, internationally then was to England, to Europe and to the US. This got a huge fillip when we managed to join the European Union. The European Union wouldn't have us for many years. It took us a long time to get in. We were knocking at the door, but he wouldn't allow us in. And after joining the Union, I believe we started to really reassess our own identity. When I was a youngster in Ireland, really when we defined ourselves as Irish, we said we're not English. By 1987, now through the 80s we started experimenting with our new sovereignty that we joined with the Union. We started developing, we tried, somebody got a book on Keynesian economics. And so when oil shocks came and we suffered sort of contraction in the economy, people said, well, we could have a counter-cyclical expansion and we should pour money into the economy. So we cut taxes and grew expenditure, and we got a very short-term gain.